Hello, I'm back. Here to talk some more about some different things related to relaxation. So I guess one thing I want to check first is the audio. Okay, there we go. It seems that maybe I'm not speaking loudly enough, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm not going off of a script or any main thing that um I've been thinking about too much so far. I just thought that I really want to post something because it's been a while and I'm trying to make regular posts. So I just figure, why not? It's Memorial Weekend. And so let me just get to it. So today's topic that I'm posting about is called distress or stress. Sometimes people use these terms interchangeably. Um, and here we're going to be talking a lot about relaxation. Like for most of the videos, that's going to be the main topic. But with relaxation comes, I guess, the opposite of relaxation, which is distress, right? So what distress is basically you can describe it as something that's emotional and mental. So there's a cognitive aspect to distress, such as the thought processes that might not be um, positive or pleasant. Um, or someone may find that their thoughts are maybe not beneficial to them, or they don't like them. They're unpleasant in some way, meaning that there's a level of distress involved. There's also distress that's related to maybe the emotional component. So when these thoughts are occurring, a person feels maybe anxious or depressed or worried or whatever you want to call it, sad, or there's like fearful. There are a lot of different options of things that can happen based on thought processes. Sometimes distress is connected to an actual event or something that's coming up or something that just happened or something that's happening like right now. Um, but that's not always the case. There can be distress that's just related to just not feeling all right. For example, if somebody's physically ill or sick or has a cold or flu or any kind of sickness, really, you won't really feel too well. You're gonna notice that you're sick because you physically don't feel great. Your body's gonna be giving you all sorts of signs, maybe through your stomach, through your coughing, through your nasal passages, and your sinuses, and your throat, and all different areas, even your like sinus pressure, your ears and all this sort of stuff might be impacted. Your skin might feel like you might get the chills, you might have muscle aches, all these kind of things, that's distressing, right? Because there's something that's happening to your body. Um so basically when people look at distress, they look at the different aspects that are impacted, physically, emotionally, mentally, just multiple different aspects that are impacted. And usually, distress is related to negative. It's a negative impact. You sense this negatively in some way or another. There's either the negative thoughts or there's something that's unpleasant that you're thinking. But the difficulty with it is that it's not the same thing for everybody. So, not everybody finds the same thing distressing. Not everybody considers the same situations or the same activities or the same upcoming events as something that would be potentially stressful or something that is currently stressful or was previously stressful to them. It really varies person to person. So it's not really something that we can say, oh, this is something that's distressing for everybody. It really just depends on how you react to it on these different levels, right? That's pretty much what distress is. Um, so person to person, it's different. For example, taking exams or taking a test or turning in assignments. For some people, it might be distressing. For other people, they couldn't care less. But those same people might experience a level of distress over like waiting in line for a roller coaster versus the other person who maybe they had a lot of significant distress over the school related stuff, but when it comes to like exciting things like they don't get overwhelmed by waiting in line for a roller coaster. They're not nervous about it. Nothing really happens, right? Their nervousness and all that like hyped up feeling, they might actually like it and enjoy it, and it might be pleasant for them versus not. Or the other person who um likes the school related stuff, they might get a lot of joy and like motivation out of like, creating assignments, finishing them, like reaching their goals, things like that. So it really varies person to person. Not everybody would consider the same things as distressing as another person would. Um, so that's just one main aspect to mention. But when it comes to all this stuff like the stress and relaxation and stress and different types of topics on this level, usually people aren't interested to know and like what's distressing. People know what's distressing for them, right? They just want to know like how do I get away from it? How do I relax from it? Um, so a lot of it's gonna really be uh just learning how to relax different things for yourself. So if it's more mental, the thoughts that are really impacting you, you want to learn how to control those. And a lot of it has to do with mindset. A lot of it is going to have to do with, you know, a mindset that you might have that depending on the event, this isn't true for 110% of events, but depending on the actual situation that is being considered distressing, um, like I was saying, not everyone's gonna find it distressing, right? I mean, there are certain things that overall most people would, but then there are always going to be those certain few people who don't find it distressing. And the main reason why, if we want to talk about like the thought process behind it, that really drives a lot of the stress. Not to say that the physiological part and all that doesn't count, but if we just talk about the mental part of it, um, it's really going to make a big difference if you're able to change your outlook on something and in a realistic way, not saying like, oh, you shouldn't be distressed over this or you shouldn't let it bother you, but just paying close attention to those specific thoughts and then paying close attention to, hey, what can I change? What can I kind of alter or what can I kind of explore more about a specific thought process? You'll be able to figure out other ways of looking at it, um, rather than just looking at it with those few probably sentences or phrases you probably tell yourself. Um, so we can start with some sort of an example. Um, I don't know what would be something that is really significant. I think for most people, finances are a stressful thing. Work is a stressful thing. School is a stressful thing. Or trying to get into work or trying to get into school can be stressful. Anything that kind of impacts your ability to purchase what you need or live the life that you want, as far as like paying your rent, paying your bills, paying for your car, getting things repaired, staying on track with all your payments and all that kind of stuff. Like anything that has to do with finances, that's usually going to stress people out, right? Um, so anytime that's impacted, it's really going to cause a major rupture in your kind of like stress levels. You might go from like, okay, I wasn't stressed, and now all of a sudden, like I am. And stress is normal. It's a natural thing. It's not. I think it's unhealthy to not ever be stressed. That means that you're probably never worried about anything. You probably don't care about anything if you're not ever stressed. Stress kind of lets you know like what's important. It gives you a somewhat of motivation, like if there's low levels of stress, right? So there's this chart that you can find that talks about like the maximum amount of stress that you can have for a specific time or based on a specific event where you're actually productive based on that stress level. So you can be stressed at a certain amount that actually helps you get things done. Like, for example, if you have a paper due or an assignment due for work or something, there might be just enough stress behind you of like, hey, they send you an email and it's due in 4 weeks, and every 4 days, maybe they're going to send you an email. So that's about a little less than 10 emails you're going to be getting until that project's actually due on that actual specific date. Um, you might just be getting multiple emails about it. And every email, the closer you get to time for the project to be due, you're going to be a little bit more stressed. But the emails, depending on what's in the content, they might not be anxiety provoking for you. They might not evoke any sort of stress level, depending on the boss or the person in charge. The way they word it might just be like enough to motivate you, right? So say if the email says, hey, just a friendly reminder, this is going to be due. You have X amount of days, and it's kind of like counting down. Maybe it shows you like a live countdown of like how much time, and like maybe there's a timeline attached to it. You should be at this point by now. Hopefully, if you're not, let us know if you have any concerns or requests or questions, or if we could advise you or you need to consult about anything. That would be a friendly kind of reminder email that usually wouldn't cause a lot of distress, especially if you have a lot of time left, right? It would be different if the email was saying, hey, you need to get this done, and if anything goes wrong, you're going to get fired or you're going to get kicked out of the program. Like, and if it's like a warning, like, hey, this is serious, you need to do it now. And you kind of get the sense like, hey, this person's kind of pissed at me about this because it's not, you know, getting done fast enough or accurately enough or whatever it may be. You can probably tell that that would be specifically something that could potentially create more stress than the friendlier email, right? But usually the thoughts that a person has about those emails is usually going to either motivate them or demotivate them. And when you start getting more and more stressed, there's something that kicks in. It's like this, they call it like the 4 F's or the 3 F's or however many F's you want to have, the fight, flight, or freeze. um those are the main things that usually happen to people once they're at a certain level of stress. And those types of uh, events that lead to that kind of stress usually leads a person to fight, flight, or freeze. Like basically at that point, you're basically in this sort of like mental survival mode, and it kind of puts your body and your mind on this level of alert. There's adrenaline related to all this. There's a lot of stuff that's going on with chemicals in your body and in your brain. When you get this kind of fear response that, or some kind of negative response, your body reacts to it, right? And it's good to have it, because if you didn't have it, I'm pretty sure most of us would probably not be living right now if we didn't have that response like wired deep in us, that you hear a honking horn and you're like, oh shoot, maybe I'm too close to the curb and there's like a truck coming over the corner or something. Like just suddenly back up. You don't like sit and like dazed and in la la land, kind of like daydreaming, and like it doesn't even phase you when you hear a loud horn honking at you, alerting you to get out of the way. So it's necessary to really have that kind of response. But the problem is that it comes up in other things too, when it's like, okay, like your body gets in this adrenaline pumping mode where sometimes it's not really the best way to function when you're trying to actually get something done. Um, so going back to the emails, the fake email example, depending on what level of stress you might have, you might actually be able to function and get the work done maybe even early because you actually care enough and they're kind of motivating you to stay on track. But that's still a level of stress, because you're actually doing it and you're reading the email and you care, and you might still think about it with that nicer email. You might still think about it and you'll be like, okay, like I have to actually do this. And there's a slight amount of pressure behind you that you put on yourself, that the company or the educational programs putting on you, to get the work done, but it's not so significant that you're in that fight, flight, or freeze, right? Um, so opposite could be that fight, flight, or freeze. Um, Provoking email that you get that's like really telling you like, hey, if you don't get this done on time, or if it isn't like accurate or 100% like what we want, you're going to be in trouble in some sort. And usually if the amount of trouble you're going to be in is really significant for you, and you find that to be something that you would really not need or not want, and it would jeopardize maybe your finances or jeopardize a lot of different things for you, that's when you would probably get in that mode. And it's hard to really snap out of that mode because your mind starts racing and racing and thinking of all the negative possible things, like, oh, this is definitely going to happen to me. This is going to happen. I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to get, written up, or like meanly spoken to or whatever it may be. And they might address this with me. There might be some review board you have to go before if you're not really doing well or whatever it may be. Um, so those kind of things might come up. And then unfortunately, obviously the person isn't going to be feeling like 100%. And but it's so distressing, and it gives a person so much of a heightened level of stress that while your mind is doing all these things and thinking and worrying and fearful, it's over flooding your mind from the creativity part that you can't really tap into anymore, or it's over flooding your mind from being able to kind of like pull out those ideas that you need and to like keep that kind of like happy sense. And what it does is it'll drain you too, and then you won't have enough energy to really finish whatever that project may be. I hope it's not too loud. I have the door open. It's kind of breezy out, but yeah, I kind of wanted some fresh air. But yeah, I mean that's kind of just what it looks like on the surface. That's kind of what it tends to look like. Really, is just having all those things going on and having the the thoughts that go along with it. Like for the nice email, you might have thoughts like, "Oh, I can do this. I'm motivated. Oh, let me not forget. Let me keep checking it every now and then and just make sure I'm on task." Maybe set some timers, maybe set some calendar alerts on your cell phone, whatever it may be. The other side of the coin, if it was a nasty kind of email or a threatening sort of email that you get that really is going to jeopardize things for you if you don't appropriately perform the way you need to, um, what that's going to really do is it's going to put you in this kind of tailspin with your thought processes, and just the thought processes alone are really going to drain you out of being able to actually do it. And a lot of times that leads to a lot of procrastination, which makes it so that somebody's just putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. Mainly the reason why people might be tempted to put things off is because once they get this flooding, it's like, okay, like that can only go on for so long. Um, if it's a nice email and you're working on a project and you're motivated, the euphoric feelings you get from feeling like you're actually accomplishing something and doing something good, and like you feel positive about it while you're doing it, those types of feelings you might get will kind of lead you to keep doing more, because it kind of gives you that bit of dopamine release that's kind of giving you more energy to kind of keep doing it, versus the other side that's kind of just draining you, almost as if you were running laps or something. You're eventually going to just tank and run out of energy, and then you just can't do it anymore. You're just done. And that's kind of where procrastination does set in, because people are like, hey, I've been even just thinking about the fact of what might happen. Once I've been thinking about it for like 5 or 10 minutes, I don't even have energy to do it. So people get in this kind of effort mode, or just like, let me just like turn on some Netflix or whatever it may be. Let me go out, let me go get a drink, or do whatever it is that you do when you don't want to do something that you feel like you need to do, just to take your mind off of it because it's so stressful. So that's kind of what it looks like, just from an example about emails and your thoughts. So some thoughts you might be having on the nice side could be like, oh, I really care about this. I really want to get it done. I'm really motivated. I can do this. Like, I got this. I can actually get it done. Versus the other side, the thoughts might be, oh my gosh, what if I don't do this? What if it doesn't go right? Like, what if I actually get fired? And it's hard to put in the effort to do it when you have all these thoughts going on that are so negative. Like, they really impact the ability to work right, to work correctly, accurately, and to get things done appropriately. Um, and it's hard for people. So mainly the first thing is really tracking down those thoughts that are coming up. If you feel like you're more on this other side of the super distressed side, you're going to want to figure out what the thoughts are that you're having, find them, think about them, identify them, and just kind of try and weigh, like, is this pretty true? Are these thoughts pretty accurate, or am I way over exaggerating? Like, a lot of times they say you want proof and evidence about it, um, and how it kind of threatens your integrity, your sense of integrity. You want to know about that too. Um, but really you want to be able to think about your thought processes without avoiding them and ignoring them, just the thought processes themselves, not the consequences of the actual project getting done and whatnot. But if you can figure out your thought processes and kind of like identify those thoughts that are overwhelming for you, you can decrease your stress by just thinking outside of those thoughts, not necessarily saying like, oh, like I'm not going to get fired 100% sure, like this isn't really going to happen. They're bluffing, nothing like that. But trying to think about, like how are these thoughts actually helping me or hindering me? If I'm sitting here thinking about this, is this actually getting me anywhere or is it really getting in my way? Um, what is a better, more appropriate way for me to think so that I can actually get done something today if it's been like 4 or 5 days where I've been having these thoughts and like they don't really like I'm still not doing any work, but you might need to eventually get to a point where you're working, right? You need to get the work done, that project done, that job done. Um, but that's just one way of kind of looking at it. Um, so that's just something that's a little like something to think about. Just kind of trying to identify for yourself, like where is it coming from? How can you tell how stressed you are, and is the level of stress that you're experiencing and the thoughts attached to the stress, is it something that's motivating you more, or is it hindering you and making you procrastinate more and demotivating you and not making you want to actually do it? So those things are probably good places to start looking before you start like delving into your thoughts. But then it's good to take time to like actually think about your thought processes and kind of dissect them and break them down. Like for the negative, usually it's going to be the ones more on this negative side, not so much with the happy email. It's going to be with the email that causes a lot of fear and worry. You want to figure out, what are you doing? Are you how do you react to it? Do you do fight? Do you flight? Do you freeze? Like which one of them is your go-to when you're distressed about a project, or if it's that project specifically, what are you doing? Are you fighting? Are you like actually sitting there like banging out the papers and like typing out the words and like just trying and like fighting against it, and just putting in the effort? Are you running away from it in whatever way you may run from it, which might be, hey, I'm going to procrastinate? Procrastination can be like flight or freeze, depending how you procrastinate, I guess. Um, or are you frozen? Do you like open your computer and sit and look at it, but then you're kind of like, that blank stare, like just the creative juices aren't flowing. I can't get out of my negative thoughts about this whole thing and the whole worry I can't get out of. And that's what freeze looks like, when you're kind of like, you're not able to like tap into those creative resources. You're not able to make a lot of progress, even though you might be opening your word processor and have your internet open, Google Scholar or whatever it may be, however you research things. um and you might be in the mood to do it, but you're just actually not actually doing it. And you sit there, let's say 2 hours, and you don't finish a thing, and then you're like drained from sitting there with the overwhelming thoughts, because they kind of make you freeze. They make it so you can't even like think. Um, you see this a lot when people give public speeches and they're kind of lost for words, but then right after the speech is done, they're like perfectly fine and they're like, oh, I can do the speech now. Or when somebody's taking a test and they kind of blank out, that's freeze mode, when you're kind of like, you're actually there, you're in the driver's seat, you're actually doing it, but you're actually not doing anything because of the flood of that, the stress that you're experiencing that comes from other things, adrenaline and whatnot. But it can be impacting in different ways. Um, so yeah, definitely learning how to figure out what it is that you do and that you're doing, so you can know how to approach it. Like if you're freezing, you want to be able to figure out what it is that can get your thoughts flowing, get the brainstorming going. If you're not freezing and you're actually like fighting, I mean, fighting is a good place to be in when it's actually a project, but then kind of your mindset with it too. Is it coming from like a negative place? Is it like, is the way you're fighting and actually getting the project done? Is it actually the way that you need to be doing it? Are you focused when you're doing this? Like, are you actually like concentrated and focused and doing it the right way? Because sometimes people go off on a tangent because they're like, I just need to work, I just need to do it, and then they realize like 2.5 days later they put in all this time and effort, and it wasn't even the right thing because when they're reading the instructions and whatnot, they might have been too overwhelmed to actually catch all the major details. So that's one thing to pay attention to as well. So that's fight and freeze, and then flight would be the kind of, how do I get out of it? How do I run away from it? There are plenty of distractions out there, and so one thing that I noticed that a lot of people do is mm, there's this kind of distraction that people get that it kind of almost mimics as if you're actually doing what you want to do or what you need to be doing, but you're not actually doing it. So, for example, if you're trying to learn how to do the project and you're watching the YouTube videos and you're reading a lot of stuff, but then you can do that for 2.5 weeks of a month and have nothing on paper, no actual ideas. It's kind of like like you're doing half of it. You're learning about it, but you're not putting it into action because it's too stressful. Like you're kind of too overwhelmed at that point still, right? So that's one thing. But then also flight really looks like just goofing off, screwing around, just kind of like not really doing the actual work, not actually getting it done. Um, but sometimes you're kind of putting in that energy and you're in that space where you're trying to actually do it, but you kind of just realize after a few days that, hey, like I've been sitting here, like what's my project what's the progress I made on this project so far? And you might look and see that there's no progress. Or maybe you've gained a small amount of knowledge with nothing on paper. And it's often good to ask yourself, if it's something that's like with a due date, ask yourself at the end of every day, if I had to turn this in today, do I have more now than I started out with? And am I on track? It's good to ask yourself those questions. Um, am I on track with what I'm trying to do? Am I um, actually progressing, or am I just wasting my time and energy staring at the screen and searching around on the internet and not actually having any tangible physical thing I can look at and say, hey, I did this chunk today? So looking at that, looking at all those things together. But once you figure out what you do in your fight, flight, or freeze mode, like which one you're in, maybe you're in multiple ones at different points and stages. But once you identify which one you're in, you want to address it and try to get out of it, as much as possible so that you're answering that question, did I make any progress? Yes. You want to be able to say yes. And you want it to be on track of whatever your timeline is that you're setting up for your goals for yourself, for whatever that project may be. And so just looking at that with stress and distress, that's basically what it looks like. And how come people don't get things done? Myself included, like I'm not any different from anybody else in all honesty. But just noticing it and knowing about it, and then you have to figure out what to do about it, which is what can you do to relax yourself so that you're not in fight, flight, or freeze mode to a point where it's not getting you that progress that you actually are looking for. And so for everyone, it's different. Um, some people, they need to take breaks, and a lot of people say, oh, every, like, say with work, like with work, for example, you have every 2 hours, you get like a 10 or 15-minute break. And then every fourth hour, you get at least a 30 minute. Some people get an hour, 45 minutes, or 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour of like a lunch break or something like that. And then another 2 hours, you get another 10 or 15-minute break or something. Then you're done. That's your 8-hour day pretty much with breaks included. Um, but that's kind of the work model a lot of people use. Um, but that's when you're doing your average job, your regular daily routine that you kind of know. Usually, once you're in it, you kind of just know how to do it, right? But projects and assignments and things like that, they're separate, I would say, because they're out of the norm and you usually don't know all the information behind it, or else you would have done it easily, quickly already. So usually there's a learning curve process to these types of projects and whatnot, which cause a level of distress because you're not accustomed to doing this, and the learning that goes into it and the thoughts that go into it, it's more taxing on you than just like the mundane process of whatever you might do 8 hours every day at work. um, so you might actually require more breaks just to give yourself a mental like relaxation point. You might need to work less time on something to push out more like to produce more of what you're trying to do. So for example, like for myself, say if I have something due in like a month or 2 months or some long period of time, and I can work on it, let's say like a day and a half every weekend, um and maybe one half a day's worth of weekdays, let's say that gives me like 2 days worth of work every week. But say that one full day I spend on the weekend actually doing it, I could cut that into like maybe 2 hours and possibly get the same amount of work done, really. Because sometimes when you give yourself more time, you get more stressed, or you take more time to actually do something that you could have potentially done in a shorter amount of time. And so sometimes you need more time to do things. Other times you might need way less time just to get more done so that you're not overwhelming yourself and you feel like, hey, I can reward myself after this now, and I can go out and like have fun with my friends or whatever I wanted to do. Um, so you can do that. And it's a very common thing that people honestly do. Just finding out what's the max amount of time you need to be working on something to actually get the max amount of the part of the project produced. Um, sorry, Windows is telling me it can't install updates. But anyways, um, but yeah, just trying to figure out those things of like what amount of time do you actually need? Because sometimes you're overwhelming yourself by putting too much time into it, especially if you have a lot of time left where you still have multiple days that you can work on something. You might be more motivated. Um, if you might be more motivated if you don't really have to spend all day, like maybe 3 4 hours is really the max capacity that your brain is really going to take. But do you really want to take 8 to 10 hours with only 3 hours worth of actual mentally working on it, right? So that's one thing I would say. So less time can mean more. You can produce more. You can be more productive in less time sometimes because you're more motivated because you're like, hey, I can do this. 3 hours is nothing if I have a full day free. I'd rather do 3 hours than like spend the whole dang day actually doing something that maybe I don't even really want to do in the first place. So there's that. Or lengthening the time if you feel like you're more pressed for time, like finding time in places that you don't really need to do certain stuff. Taking some activities off your calendar to sit and get it done. um when you're motivated, because that's one thing too. Some people's motivation kind of fluctuates, and you might be motivated here or not motivated there. But sometimes it's good to take that motivation as just take that momentum, and when you see it, just start, just start working on something when you're motivated, because you might actually get a lot done. So just working with like, I wouldn't say only wait until you're motivated, but because you might never get motivated, but you can wait until you're motivated, to use that momentum to kind of, because what happens is once you've kind of reached part of your goal, or you've produced a lot of what you're trying to get done, you can look at it and see actual results, and that'll motivate you further the next time you go to work on it, versus like, oh, I've been here for like 2 weeks still and I still haven't done a dang thing that I can see that I've progressed on. And then that makes it harder, because then the further you get, you're less and less and less motivated, right? Because you haven't done anything, and you feel like you've been putting in all this effort for like a month, and you've been thinking about it for a month and maybe brainstorming, but you really don't have anything on paper yet, and it's like a week left till it's due. That's already stressful, because then your brain's going to start doing that flooding thing again. um so yeah, those would be the main things you could do. As far as how you approach an actual project and how you approach your thought processes about it. Um, Other things that I can mention definitely have to do with relaxation techniques. So definitely if you need, say it goes along with taking more breaks, using more relaxation techniques. So some people say, "Oh, I meditate like once a day and I usually do yoga like once a day or something like that." But when you're in a high stress, high strung kind of time, you might need to do that more. You might need to do more of those things that work for you more often than you usually do, just to keep you kind of rolling and going at the pace you need to go. It's not really bad to put in more relaxation time for yourself and more recovery time for yourself so you can actually do what you want to do and need to do. Um, Also different things like, social, having like a social unit that's like, so you don't feel so isolated in whatever it is, especially if you're not motivated. A lot of people get a lot of good motivation from like a community source, so even like forums or there's this app. It's not the best of apps. I probably shouldn't say that. I don't know, maybe it is for some people, but there's this app called Amino. I don't know if it's a website too, but they have different topics, so you could search for things like, I don't know, like business majors or political science or whatever, whatever job or field you work in, like finance or whatever it may be. And there are people on there. It's just like a live forum that has different chat rooms and different topics that you can talk to people live. The difficulty with it is that it is a little like, most people are, a lot of times are on there just like, hi, hi, hi. Everyone's like introducing themselves and you kind of never get into a conversation. But sometimes, some of the chat rooms you can actually talk to people and be like, yo, just somebody give me some words of encouragement on this thing I'm working on. And then people can just be like, oh, yeah, you can do it. Or like, even if it's someone you don't know, like it might be nice. Some people like that motivation, even if it's coming from like strangers on the internet. Um, or forums that are more like developed where you're actually having like a discussion board and like it's pretty well kept up, it's updated so that like within the day or two you're getting kind of like feedback on like any problem you're having staying motivated. You can use forums for that. There are all sorts of things online where you can get support if you need it or want it, just to kind of keep you motivated on your project, or if you needed help from some of it, you could probably find the help you needed somewhere. Um, so those are things I would mention, as well as like people you already know, your own community support that from people you already have, maybe in your field or at your work or at your school, or just local buddies that you have around, people who kind of know what you're up to. Just shoot them a text or call them up or video chat and just be like, hey, I just want to talk about this thing. I'm really not motivated. I'm really having trouble struggling starting it. And maybe they could just give you a little boost. Just talking about it sometimes for a few minutes just helps you kind of like get a different perspective and get kind of a different idea about it. So that's, the relaxation part, the social part. You can also tap into, I don't know, a lot of people try like spiritual things too, to relax them, try to keep them kind of like it's spiritual things can be very motivating, and at the same time they can kind of put your mind at ease, especially for people who believe in like a higher power of some sort, or believe that you are a high power of some sort, like you can kind of really get back to your beliefs about, hey, like I can really do this, like I'm not as limited as I'm telling myself that I am. Like I actually do have this power and energy in me to get it done. It's only me that's stopping me from doing it, and I do have the time and the resources and the energy to do it. I'm just limiting myself. Because a lot of times that might be really what it is. And sometimes if you can tap into something spiritual that helps you with that, it can kind of remotivate you or kind of rewire your thinking a little bit at times. And again, doing it more than you would do it on average when you feel like you're struggling with something that you're trying to actually finish or get done, or if there's anything, not even just projects, but any sort of distressing thing that you're going through that you're trying to um, get through, you can apply these kind of techniques in that way. You can really apply them. You can think about them uh on these different levels, the social level, your kind of mental, like, thought process level, how it's emotionally impacting you too, even if you just look at the fight, flight, or freeze and what you actually are doing and how it actually impacts you. Are you worried? Are you sad? Are you anxious? Like, what's going on for you when this is happening? And trying to address that, and then putting in all the skills that you use that help you, like with socializing and relaxing and spiritual things that you can do. Some people like physical, like, just, like, go to the gym, like, go on a run or something, like, do push-ups, do a jump rope in your bedroom or whatever. You don't even have to have an actual jump rope. Actually, with jump rope skills, you can just, like, mimic the actual jump rope techniques and still get results from that, with no jump rope whatsoever. And you can make a jump rope out of all sorts of things too. So, I'm pretty sure most people have a lot of old cables, like Ethernet cables and things laying around. You can wind some of those things together and make a nice little jump rope for yourself if you have to. Um, but yeah, just anything really that uh kind of takes your focus somewhere else, but also not so far away from the problem, right? You want to be dealing with the problem while you're doing what you need to be doing. So it works easily talking about this in terms of, like, projects and things like that, because they come and go. Like, there's usually a deadline for them, and you either met the deadline or you didn't, or you finished the project appropriately or you didn't, and then it's going to move on to something else, regardless of if you keep the job or keep the schooling or whatever it may be. Eventually, there's a next stage after that deadline date. Um, Other problems are kind of more difficult because they kind of come and go, maybe. So if it's a different type of situation that's causing the stress, you can still do this, but it's a little harder when there's not really an end, like, definitive, like, end in sight where you can be like, hey, like, at least this is gonna end on, like, October 1st or whatever it may be. Like, if there's not an actual end date to it, it gets a little more tricky. Um, yeah, but also, people say this a lot with this goal setting and, trying to, like, map it out, chart it out for yourself with a timeline of what you need to do and when, so you can track it and see, like, am I actually doing it? Um, some people are good at sticking to a strict, like schedule. Some people aren't. Some people don't like it. Like, once they make a schedule, they're no longer motivated. They're like, hey, screw this. I don't want to do it anymore because now I feel like a little too trapped and too much like I have to commit to this. But whatever works for you. Trying different things and just seeing what works really, but really trying them, not spending the time thinking about it more than doing it. Like, putting in the actions, putting in the work, like, if you go to a temple or you go to a church or you go online and, listen to speeches or watch lectures, um, somebody I really like is Osho, Osho. Just listening to stuff like that is really kind of motivating and just kind of gets my mind kind of wired and, like, thinking about something that's kind of more on a positive note. I wouldn't say I always agree with it 110%, but a lot of it, like, I can learn about some different way of thinking about something that I never may have really thought about by myself. So those are different things that you might want to try, when you have stress or distress of some sort, and trying to, like, function and feel like you have some control over it without it actually controlling you. Um, but also really just realizing that a lot of times we do really limit ourselves. It's not really like to blame people for their problems. I'm not really saying it like that, but a lot of times, like, when we do pay attention to our thought processes and things, we realize it's us that's telling us that this is going to go wrong, or it's us that's telling us that it's not going right, or that we can't do it. It's really maybe not fully the truth, because we've probably made it this far, in whatever you're doing, and you've probably had harder times than you already are having right now trying to figure something out. Um, so you can probably just apply the fact that, you have a lot of resources at the tip of your fingers. You just need to tap into them sometimes, um, and just not really demotivate yourself to a point where you're not getting anything done, or noticing when you need a break and when you need a rest, and then noticing when it's time to just plow through and, like, get the work done. So yeah. um, This is just by the seat of my pants. Kind of wanted to post something that might be of some use to somebody. It's probably not the most thought provoking of videos, but that's kind of just one way to kind of like challenge your own outlooks on things when you're trying to deal with high stress events, high stress types of things. And you can do this regularly, kind of train yourself so that you can, every time something similar comes up, you can deal with it. But this is getting to be close to 45 minutes. I'm going to stop this and I'll say bye now. And hopefully, this was helpful to somebody in some way. Um, I'm going to be setting up some posts on the blog as well as some podcast clips if I still have space where I can do that. So you guys will probably be hearing from me again shortly. But thanks for watching and enjoy. Bye.